This is Eastmans Elevated podcast. I have on great guests that are really knowledgeable, consistently successful. We're able to dive deep down the rabbit holes of these different subject matters of shooting, of physical fitness, of mental toughness and drive. All the different skills that make up a complete hunter that you can become.
Here's your host, Brian Barney.
Hey, what's happening, guys? Got a brand new episode for you. So this week on the podcast, I have back on Stephen Rosso. Stephen's just a diehard hunter. He set some big goals this year, harvesting a next level buck and a next level bull. Man, he just killed a bomber buck and a really nice bull. But we talk about it in the podcast, but he had like 9 or 10 weekends of scouting, trying to find these animals, and then a ton of time hunting. So he's just a great go-getter. He's a public land guy that just works really hard to accomplish his goals, and so really fun to see his success this season, and then to get him on the podcast and have this conversation and dive in depth about locating these animals and harvesting these animals and just what it takes to find and be successful on these critters. So a really fun episode, great back and forth. I really enjoyed the conversation, and I know you guys will too. Sponsor for today's show is Yeti Coolers. Yeti's just a great company with great products. These Yeti coolers, they have changed the way I'm able to hunt. I hunt a lot in the early season when it's hot. If you harvest something, you instantly have to get it in a cooler and on ice, and the Yetis just keep ice longer. I can go on a week-long trip where I'm living out of my truck, or even when I'm backpacking is leaving this Yeti cooler at my truck. So it's got ice in it, so the minute I get my meat out and out of the field, I can get it on ice and cooled down. So it's changed that for me. It's also you can freeze things solid on it. Like some guys use some dry ice. I'll use ice with a little salt in the bottom, and you can actually freeze meat. And so therefore, if you're hunting with a buddy, you can get your meat back on ice, back in the cooler, get it frozen, and continue to hunt. I always like to mention too that it counts as a bear-proof container. So important when you're hunting the national forest or parking your truck at different trailheads. It's got to be, your food has got to be in a bear-proof container. You can get written a ticket and or worse yet, have a bear get into your stuff or into your camp. But so you got to either buy a bear-proof container, or you got to hang your food, and it's got to be 4 foot away from the trunk, 10 foot high, so the bears can't get at it. Or you could just have a Yeti cooler, throw a lock on either end, and you're good to go. So that's such a huge benefit of having the Yeti, is that it is a bear-proof container. So yeah, I love their products. Also love their all the stuff they have. Their ramblers and tumblers, coffee cups, thermoses. Just have some amazing products that I'm using absolutely all the time. And they gave us a couple products that we gave away to Stephen here at the end of the podcast. So that was real nice of Yeti. But yeah, just can't thank those guys enough for sponsoring the podcast and building great products. With that, over there at Eastman's, we recorded a good podcast the other day, all about hunting with llamas. Pretty wild. Just dove into this podcast about hunting with llamas and just the benefits of them, and the temperament, and just some amazing information that had me thinking I might use a llama on that elk hunt. But really fun podcast we recorded. But yeah, we're just working away here. I know everybody's been hunting hard. A lot of success this year in the office. I saw Lindsay, the video editing gal. She harvested a nice buck the other day, and yeah, it's just it's been a great year, and it's fun to be a part of, and fun to be a part of this company. I just used to I used to get my Eastmans magazines in the mail when I was just a young kid, or young 20s. I'd get these Eastmans, and I'd dive into them, and I'd read the entire magazine. I still have a subscription now and read everybody's articles that come out, but I can just remember so hungry and so thirsty for knowledge, and that was the best resource out there. And I'd wait the mailbox and the new magazine would come and read it, and just having these dreams and thoughts of working for a Western company, and then to be able to get a chance there at Eastman's to write, and more opportunity to do this podcast and do the little bit of filming. I just so fortunate to work for such a great company owned by a couple great guys, Guy and Ike. I really like those guys. They're really intelligent. they're so knowledgeable about hunting, but also just about business and life and things. They're just really good guys and have good morals and good ethics. So it's just fun to work for a company like that. That's the leader in hunting Western game. So really fun to get that opportunity. I sure appreciate it. And I'm just, gosh dang it, I am so busy here trying to get this house done and other construction work, and man, I'm just swamped. It's just killing me. I got to get after these muleys that are rutting, and I'm just limited on time. But the time I do have, I'm gonna enjoy, and I'm gonna go on this adventure hunt. I'm gonna leave tonight with my daughter. It's Friday now, so go get a little work done here, and then we're gonna get out of here and travel down and travel to this muley spot I have and see if we can't track one down. We've only got a couple days, but we're gonna hunt hard, and it's just good quality time that I can spend, with my high school daughter. She's a freshman this year and getting older, and I just wanna try to share the outdoors with her, whether it's fly fishing or hunting, and give her these adventures and these things, this time that she can spend with dad one-on-one. So I am really looking forward to that. So I haven't packed anything yet. I just was working last night till 8:30, 9 o'clock, and I'm running by the seat of my pants right now. But we'll get it all ready to go. It's only a couple days. Throw all the stuff in the truck and take off when she gets out of school, and all good to go, and hopefully we can find some bucks. I know they're rutting good right now. It's just killing me. Got to get out and get after them, and then the following weekend I'll be out with my bow and try to arrow one of those big brutes. But yeah, it'll be fun. It's fun. Hunting season is here. Yeah, it's too bad my November's so busy, but that's just the way it goes. It's just life and responsibility and things you need to get done. And I took a lot of time and had a bunch of amazing adventures early, and so now I just gotta knuckle down and get this house done and get some other work done. So it's all good. Busy, which is always good too. I like keeping busy and getting things accomplished, and that feels good as well. So get some things done, and hopefully I'll have a little time in this late season, maybe that late season Idaho or late season Coos deer, and really take some time and enjoy myself. So yeah, I'm having fun, get some work done, and head off with my daughter tonight. So anyways, great episode. Let's get this thing rolling. So it's me and Stephen Rosso. Great conversation. Eastmans Elevated. Here we go. Hey, how's it going?
Good, man. How are you?
Good. Sorry I'm running a few minutes behind today.
Yeah, no worries, man. I'm moving pretty slow myself.
Yeah, I hear you. It sounds like you had a big overnighter last night or something, power outage?
Yeah, just a scheduled work outage where we had to do a bunch of work and shut down most of the power north of Jackson, but it's just one of those things we can only do at night because no one likes to have their power off during the daytime.
Oh, gotcha. So puts you to the graveyard shift.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah. How often do you have those come up?
Not too often. This was just for a big project that's been going on all summer. We just kind of were at the final part where we had to cut over a bunch of our main power line into a new set of equipment and everything, and we had to turn off the power to do it.
Yeah, gotcha. Well, that's good to have done.
Yeah, we when we work late nights like that, we usually get rest period the next day. So for every hour worked past midnight, we get off that the next day in terms of our normal work day. So I got a little bit of rest today, hopefully, but I still am in that weird kind of just weird zone where my eyes aren't focusing correctly because I was awake for too long.
Man, it messes with you. Like, there's a reason the military uses sleep deprivation as a form of torture. Like, it gets to you.
Yeah.
And when you switch your schedule like that, you think you could just swap sleep and sleep, during the day and make up that time. But it just seems like things are a little bit weird when you do that, when you stay up all night. Doesn't that seem like it to you?
Oh yeah, entirely. And I mean, it seems like we get a few of these a year where whether it's power outages that keep us up that are unscheduled or whatever, but it takes a few days to kind of come back into the normal mode after you go through one of them.
Gotcha. Yeah, for sure. That's the way it is for me. I had a buddy that worked night shifts for quite a while, and man, he had a tough time, like, just getting his body to adapt to it. In fact, the guy I'm working for now, he does shifts up in he's up on the North Slope working oil rigs up there, and he does like what does he do? 3 weeks on, 3 weeks off, 3 weeks on, 3 weeks off. But every time he does a shift, he goes to all nights or goes to all days. So he's always switching his schedule. And then his travel home from the North Slope, he's always traveling for a day and a half to 2 days up all night. He's just a zombie when he gets home and then takes a couple days to recover. But man, it really messes with your system.
Yeah, my both my roommates are actually, they work oil rigs as engineers in the Gulf of Mexico, so they're the same type of deal and schedule. They're a month on, a month off, and so and they do the same thing. They rotate like days or nights when they go on different hitches. So I never know what they're on until they get back, and then I realize they look like a zombie for 2 days.
Right? Yeah, I listened to a podcast not too long ago about sleep and just the importance of it and how many hours you get and quality sleep. And I wasn't paying as much attention to it, but I can say I pay more attention to it now. And you definitely, like, I'm real fortunate. I sleep really hard. So when I go to sleep, the hours that I do get, I'm not waking up in the middle of that, breaking up my sleep patterns. But I can sure tell a difference between, 6 hours and between 7 hours, or 5 and 7, or 6 and 8, or whatever. I can sure notice the difference just how I feel that next day.
Yeah, I agree. I struggle with getting really good sleep. I don't know why. My body just, the past like 6 months, a year, I've just been in and out of weird sleep patterns and not being able to sleep well through a whole night. And I've definitely noticed in these past, like this summer and this fall, I mean, it really has taken its toll just on it's hard to keep your mindset up when you're not getting enough sleep. You just don't feel like you're waking up rested ever,
Man, isn't that the truth? And just tough to operate when you're tired. And I'm not tired that often, but when I am, it's just tough to operate. And you're not. It seems like things aren't clicking as quick for you. Things aren't firing as fast in your brain. It just seems like you're a little off or something.
Yeah, I agree. I've been trying to figure it out what's been going on for a while. I've been in weird modes where I fall asleep and then I'm awake just ready to go at 3:34 in the morning. I'm like, I'm not hunting, stop. And then of course when you're in the mountains, you don't want to get out of your sleeping bag, so it's all vice versa once you're up there.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I hear you. No, you get, I'm that same way. I was hunting so hard for so many days in a row that, yeah, I was just, you get in a routine and then you just, whether you got enough sleep or not, you're just up at that hour ready to go, and it's tough to fall back asleep. There's nothing worse than laying in bed, like in the middle of the night thinking, God, I gotta get to sleep, and your mind's just racing, thinking of things. I hate that.
Yeah, that's my thing is I struggle to shut my mind down if I fall asleep, that's fine. But then when I wake up at like 2, 3 in the morning, my mind just starts thinking, and then I'm screwed because by the time I get tired again, it's time to get up and go to work, and then I'm just groggy.
Yeah. Oh man, that's the worst. Yeah, a lot of people struggle with their sleep. I had a buddy that was out here hunting with me, and just the absolute nicest guy in the world, the best guy. He'd do anything for you. His name's Janus. He's just so selfless. He works really hard, but he cannot sleep. He gets like 3 to 5 hours a night, and he's just up all night. He's got a real problem with it. But then he naps throughout the day trying to catch up on that sleep. His body trying to catch up, but he has a real problem and real trouble getting a full night's rest.
Yeah, that's not fun. It's a lot better when you feel rested and you're just ready to go. Because my other problem is I'm not a good daytime nap person unless it's on the mountain, like laying on a side hill. I can nap up there, but when I'm in town, I can't just come back to my house usually and fall asleep. I don't know why. I'm just not a good napper, I guess.
Yeah, never. I never fall asleep during the day. And well, my deal, even when I'm hunting, is if I sleep at all during the day, then I won't sleep at night. And so
Right.
I never take a nap ever. Like it may be once every couple years I fall asleep during the day, but yeah, I just don't nap at all. I get all my sleep at night, but it makes me think about it, as we're doing these traveling hunts and I'm constantly pushing, like right now I'm a weekend warrior where I've got to drive Friday after work and work right now, we're just putting in crazy hours trying to finish this house, but you drive Friday after work to get there, hunt Saturday and Sunday, and then drive home Sunday night, a lot of times after the evening hunt. But I think about it, it gets really dangerous when you're traveling and you're tired. You're just better off to pull off and get some sleep. And even, it's amazing how even like a half an hour nap or even an hour nap, you just feel refreshed when you wake up. But when you start getting groggy like that and you're on the road, like I have never fallen asleep behind my truck. You know, I refuse to. I won't shut my eyes. I won't fall asleep. But I start to lose focus on the road. Like my eyes are open, and all of a sudden I can't focus on the yellow and the white line. Like everything's going out of focus. And I think that's where it gets really dangerous, where you just got to pull over and get some sleep.
Yeah, that was me this morning when we got like an hour break in between the outage and when we had to show back up to work. And so we went and grabbed a breakfast at a local place, and then we went to work, and our boss just gave us a kind of a short list of things to do for the 1 hour the 2 hours we were supposed to stay at work before our rest period started. And I had to drive out to the village, and I was in my own truck by myself. And I mean, I was focusing and everything, and I was awake, but my eyes just were not tracking, and things were, and I just found myself kind of jerking the wheel a lot. And I'm like, if there was a cop behind me, he'd probably pull me over thinking I was drunk.
Exactly. Well, I think it's more dangerous than drunk driving. You just, you just, like, you're looking at the road, but and I've heard that it's like your mind is actually trying to fall asleep with your eyes open. Like you're losing all your thought process and your brain reaction, and you're losing all that, and your brain's trying to fall asleep, but your eyes are still open and you're still looking forward. It's so weird.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. Well, hopefully you can get caught up on your sleep, but man, you got to feel good about things. You had a heck of a hunting season. What a buck and what a bull you turned up.
Yeah, I mean, I'd spent enough time dreaming about how it was going to go. Then once it finally got here and it actually eventually all kind of lined out and happened. It kind of was, a very big weight off my shoulders for myself, just feeling like the effort was worth it after doing last year, putting in a ton of effort and just not seeing it come to fruition. It was a great feeling to have everything play out how it did, and it was just a couple of awesome, great hunts.
Yeah, well earned and well deserved. I know you worked really hard at it, and that's what's fun to see. But so start me off. We talked on the podcast, and you were right in scouting season, and man,
Yep.
you were scouting like a madman. It was fun to see.
Yeah.
You were going every free day you had, every free weekend you had, and going really hard. Like, what's your strategy when you're scouting for a big buck like that? Like, how do you try to cover country or new areas, or how do you go about it, Stephen?
Oh, of course, nowadays with like Google Earth and everything, that's an easy tactic to sit on all winter while the snow's out, piling up outside. And I mean, for this area in western Wyoming, I just look for the areas that to me just kind of reach out and scream mule deer. I look for water sources, but not obvious ones like lakes and stuff that, like we talked, I think the last time, is going to attract horse hunters or bigger groups of people, especially non-resident hunters that know water's scarce around here. They're going to look for the areas where they're not worried about water as much as where I have the time and ability to put in a little more effort into finding remote water sources. So I base a lot of my scouting now on where I think other people aren't going to go, and just getting into more remote spots. And so that was kind of my plan this summer going into it, was just looking at spots I've never been before and seeing new country, and just going a little bit more remote and a little bit further in, and just into some stuff that I've never really set foot in, but I had seen, driving down the road at a long distance, these high mountain peaks, and just always want to go there. And that was kind of how it all started. And then, I think when we talked, I think it was another 3 weeks of scouting before I turned up the buck I eventually harvested. And, between all I was kind of crunching numbers after my hunting, was tailed off. And I think I did, out of 11 weekends before hunting season opened, I did 10 of them scouting after leaving work 3:30 on Friday, driving to a spot and hiking in. And then those last 4 were spent strictly in the same spot watching that one buck once I found him. So I think it was the 7th different area I scouted when I found him.
Okay. Yeah, good for you. That's That's a ton of effort. 10 out of 11 weekends going for it. You were driven and you driven to succeed and accomplish your goals, and then it came together for you. Your hard work paid off. But that's so cool to see. Yeah, so much of the scouting nowadays, like you were saying in the wintertime, just choosing those locations. And also you mentioned too, like driving down the road and looking up, you can see a long ways back in some of those bucky areas. And it's tough to describe to people when you're describing, what a bucky area is, but it's just spending a lot of time in area that holds bucks, and you start to find them in there, and you start to get a feel for it, or a feel for the country, what you want it to look like. And so you spent the winter and you picked out a bunch of different areas that you liked, and probably some that you've hunted before and some that you haven't. And then you were just going and you were looking for a next level buck. And so you said you traveled to 7 different locations. And so you're going into these locations, are you're getting in there and spending the weekend, you're obviously glassing morning and night, and you're turning up bucks. You're just trying to turn up that next level one that you really want to focus all your energy on. Do I have that right?
Yeah, I mean, where, with this area, I just know what the genetics and the capabilities are if I put the effort in, and what can possibly be found. So I have a couple areas I really like to look at every summer. I like to make a hike in there just because they're fun spots that I now know. But for the most part, I just like seeing new country. I guess it's been in me ever since I was guiding for years. I just don't like getting set in the same spot where, some people have their spot they go to every opening morning for 20 years. I prefer just to continually connect the dots, like I've always told myself, where I like to connect all these ranges, and I've slowly am starting to connect a lot of dots where things just all this country starts to come together when you get to go up these different drainages and just kind of pull it all together and realize, I mean, it's huge country, but it all connects when you're starting to, hit it from different sides. And it's kind of cool to see it from that aspect. So that's one of the other reasons I really like to explore new stuff, is just gives me a different perspective. And, I go from everything from the high rocky basins that have no water, where you can where the buck numbers are a little bit less usually, but I usually find some pretty good bucks up there, to some of the little bit lower, country that has a lot of younger bucks, but you still find those 180 plus bucks down in there. But it's kind of cool out here just to see what, the difference in these bucks. You can find them everywhere. It's kind of more what kind of country you want to hunt, from lowland to high country. And of course I live and die for the high country ridges. And so that's where I like to be. But, it's cool out here where we have the ability to hunt a little bit lower elevation and have them there in early season just as much as you can go up in the high basins and find bucks to chase too.
Yeah, you're living in just the mecca for mule deer. It's such a great location. There's so many great spots across the country to hunt mule deer with good populations and good habitat. But yeah, that western Wyoming is one of my favorites. I love that place. And you're right. You can find them all the way from low to high. And I'm the same way, as I like that remote, gnarly backcountry, and it's, I can find where the bucks grow up back in there and read the country. But a lot of those deer too, just 1,000 to 2,000 feet down the hill, it's anywhere they can get away from pressure and grow up, they grow big. And so a lot of really good spots are not on the top ridge, or not in those top basins. And furthermore, a lot of those top basins that are easier to get to, the bucks get shot out of them, and there's younger ones hanging up in there. So you do have to kind of find those folds where those bucks can grow up. And whether that's, remote country, or whether it's, sometimes it's a sleeper spot like a face right by a trailhead that everybody walks by, or, a ridge or a basin that can't easily be glassed. Like it can't be glassed from a trail or a ridge line. You have to lose elevation to get a vantage point on it. But any of those spots where those bucks can grow up, it seems like that's where you start finding those older age class and those more mature bucks, like that one you turned up. What a beautiful buck that thing was.
Yeah, I mean, I of course never forget the first morning laying eyes on him. The weekend before, I had been up in a different set of basins, and it was gorgeous country. It was not that fun to get into. It was about 8 hours of hiking to get up into it, but it wasn't loaded with deer, but the deer I found were all substantially worth going back for. There was 2 bucks there was one in particular that I'm going to be going back to look for this year. He was a younger buck. I mean, just no mass in his horns, but huge wrapping mainframe with deep forks and matching inline kickers. And then he was with a huge typical that both of them I put kind of in the 180-ish to pushing 190, especially with the typical, which was an older deer. But I was sitting there on Saturday morning, I think it was Sunday morning, about to pack up camp, and it was kind of hazy sun, and I decided to look at this other ridge about 2 miles away for no reason other than I have a spotting scope and why not. And I picked out a buck feeding in the complete open daylight, and he just looked like a huge heavy typical. And I could see he had a big tall inline, and I couldn't see width or anything, but I knew he was worth a better, closer look. So that's when I decided the next weekend to go over to that section area and try and turn up that buck. And I never did see that buck again, but I hiked in there Friday night, and on Saturday morning I there.
Oh, yeah. Sorry about that, Stephen. It cut out there. So you.
It was on the phone.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah, no. So I hiked up to the top of a ridge, and I couldn't turn up that inline buck, and I never would. The entire next 4 weeks I basically lived on that ridge. I never turned him up, but I was kind of discouraged by what I was seeing. I saw some younger bucks, but just wasn't seeing the buck numbers. So I was pretty content on making my plans for hunting the basins I was in the weekend before. But about 9 o'clock, I was heading off the ridge and just back down to my camp, and I knew there was an avalanche chute below me, but I couldn't see into it. So I kind of decided to lose elevation. I was like, I'm up here. I need to at least take a look. And I was sneaking down through the trees to look into this big avalanche basin, and I could see him out, he was in broad daylight, and I brought up my binos. And the moment I put my binos on him, I knew he was that type of buck I've kind of been searching for and dreaming of seeing, just the one that has that wow factor, that kind of holds your attention. And I set my spotting scope on him, and the moment I dialed in on him, there was no question he was the buck I was going to be putting my time and effort into for the rest of the season.
Man, how killer. Yeah, sometimes it's just sitting down like that spotting scope 2 miles away looking over those basins and drainages, and it's amazing in the summertime. Those bucks are just out for longer. They have their red coats. They're easier to see where, you might never catch a buck like that once it gets into the heart of rifle season, out middle of the day. Now, maybe bow season you catch them out in the middle, and they do get up and graze around, but it just seems like that scouting season is a better season to catch them, and you can glass miles away with the spotting scope, and those deer that you wouldn't see with the binoculars, all of a sudden you can pick them out with the scope. But it's so important, especially like as the sun illuminates that hillside. If the sun's shining just right on that hillside where the sun's at your back and you're glassing that hillside, you can look miles away to find deer and populations. But that's so funny how that led to finding the big buck.
I know, and I mean, I've had a lot of people just ask me questions about, hunting out west. They're coming out for their first hunt or things like that, and they, a lot of the big question, you always see people ask is, do I really need a spotting scope? And I mean, for me, my type of hunting, and it's different in different scenarios, but I live and die by my spotting scope. I will put miles upon miles on my eyes before I need to put them on my legs. And out here, that's just necessary for covering country to keep finding things. Because if I were to try to see into every drainage I wanted to look into just with binos, I'd beat myself up. There'd be no way I'd be able to cover country like I do all summer, because I'd just be dog tired trying to glass into everything. And I think, as trying to determine the caliber of it's a good buck to, is it that next class of buck? You really can't do it without dialing in on a spotting scope, because you don't want to go in there and blow them out of the place they're living, especially if you're hoping to scout them for the summer. And having the ability to stay away from them and know what they are and watch their patterns from afar is, I think that's huge in terms of successfully patterning a buck to hunt, hopefully on an opener or early season when they're still going to be there.
Well, yeah, and to your point, like to try to cover all those drainages, you couldn't get to all those drainages and look at the right times. Like with a spotting scope and a master vantage point and your binoculars, you can cover just vast amounts of country at the right glassing times, that first hour and that last hour, to see what's living around. I'm with you. I am a minimalist. I mean, I'll cut the end of my toothbrush off, but I will not forget my spotting scope and my tripod ever. It's got to come with me. It's just a necessary item. And for locating bucks, for judging bucks, and then also like the bow season for keeping track of them. Like you find a buck that you want to get a stock on, it's amazing how they'll snake in between the trees and all of a sudden they'll disappear and they'll reappear. But to try to keep your eyes on them, to bet them in their exact position and get a high percentage stock, that spotting scope is key.
Yeah, and I mean, like when a buck beds, especially in that scattered thick timber on a steep side hill, I mean, sometimes you're literally looking for a main beam flickering behind a branch to let you know he's where he's at, and then it's go time in terms of being able to put a stock. But until you know where he's bedded, it's so risky putting a stock on these bucks, because when they disappear in that timber, you don't know if they kept feeding across the hillside or not. And I mean, I've definitely sat there for hours picking apart what seems like pine needles, and then all of a sudden I see a flicker of movement, catches my eye, and then as I focus in on it, it becomes obvious there he is right there. But until that movement happened, I mean, I never would have seen him.
Yeah, isn't that the truth? Yeah, isn't that funny how you can sit there, hunting. We hunted Wyoming this year with my dad, and we saw a really good buck put away in the morning. And so we sat up above where he put away, where we kind of had a good vantage point of all the timber where he'd bed in. And we sat up there for, 3-4 hours, just glassing around in those openings and in the timber. And I don't know if he changed beds or if all of a sudden I just caught him down in there, but then I caught like this really good buck down in the timber and all these rock slides, and he was bedded down in there. And it's always a feather in my cap too when I can spot those bedded mule deer, because they tuck in so tight in there. But he ended up killing a nice buck. He actually shot the wrong buck, but that good one, that gave us the opportunity to work down in there, and he was able to get a shot on a nice buck. One of his better deer for sure. But we had,
like you guys having fun.
Yeah. Oh, we had one with great big backs and a big inline and a really good heavy mature buck picked out for him, and yeah, we had them all laid down and shooting position. We had snuck within, I think we were around 300 yards, had a good wind, just waiting for the buck to stand. And all of a sudden my dad goes, there he is, after a couple hours of laying down there. And I said, where's he at? And then he answered me with a boom. And all of a sudden I saw that thing rolling down the hillside. He didn't wait too long to squeeze the trigger. And it was a really nice buck. I can see why he shot it, but it was a different buck than the one we had glassed down there. But really fun hunting with him, and really fun hunting that Wyoming country. I've hunted it, multiple bow seasons, and I've been fortunate to harvest some really good bucks out of there. But that was the first time I was able to go down and experience the rifle season. It was fun down there. I really had a good time.
How was your pressure where you guys were?
I always hear it's bad down there, but it wasn't bad at all. I mean, there was a few guys around, but they just weren't really keyed into what the deer are doing. They were kind of after some easy ones here and there, and we saw a buck shot and heard a few rifle shots, but man, it just wasn't that bad. Like as compared to like general rifle season for elk in Montana, it was nothing. It just it was like there was nobody around. I couldn't believe it. Everybody had told me how bad the hunting pressure was during rifle season, and every place we went, we were kind of able to find our own little niche in country and see multiple different bucks and pass on a bunch of different bucks. So we had a great experience. But I'm sure it can be different, per area you're hunting. And I ran into a bunch of bow hunting pressure, a couple of years prior, where I was just amazed at all the guys in the hillside. So I'm sure it's all about where you're hunting, and maybe we just caught a good window in there. How was it for you?
Yeah, I mean, where I was, so before the hunt, well, right about when the archery hunt started, I went up there and I hunted him the opening week of archery, and the basin he was living in was just, I knew from the get-go, it just really isn't archery friendly. There's not much for timber, and they were bedding. So the 4 weeks I watched him, I rarely saw him more than 5 to 10 minutes through a whole weekend at most. I'd go days without seeing him, and he lived high out of the basin on a high ridge, and then he rolled into a steep avalanche chute. And I tried to hike over the top of this other 11,000 foot peak to try and look down into there when I couldn't turn him up the next weekend after I originally found him. And I about killed myself getting up there and realized I couldn't do that every time. And there was no way I knew I could sneak down into this chute to see him. It was just one of those places. There was a reason a giant buck called it home. And so all these weekends of scouting and trying to pattern him, I always saw him up on that high ridge, or he'd be coming out from what I knew he was probably getting water down low, and then he'd go up on the ridge for a couple days, and he was just doing circles. But I was really worried that I wasn't going to be able to do anything with him living on that high ridge because there was just no approach to it. He literally, with the few other bucks he was with, he just had every angle covered always. And so the first archery hunt, he was up there, and there was really nothing I could do. So I basically just kept patterning him and watching him and kind of kept an eye on him. And then between that first weekend and the next, it turned out I found another guy who knew of the buck as well and had scouted him early in August. And luckily, he was a really good sportsman. We got to talking. We've talked on the phone multiple times, before the season got really going in rifle, and we were pretty open with each other what our plans were. I told him I was, if it got to rifles, I was going to go up one more week in archery, and if it got to rifle season, I was going to hunt the basin. And he told me that he thought the buck was going to get blown out and was going to go to that kind of avalanche chute he was going to be living in. So he was going to hike up the other ridge for the rifle opener. And, it was pretty nice that we were able to be open with each other and wish each other good luck. There was, no hard anything, and so that was nice. But then the next weekend I went in archery, I made a stalk on him because he had actually shed his velvet and was down in the basin, which was kind of what I was hoping. If he was going to shed his velvet, that he might drop that 1,000 feet that sometimes it seems like those velvet bucks will do when they shed. They kind of go back into a almost early October buck mode.
Yes.
And so he did, and he was low in the basin, like where I first saw him a month before, and he was down in this little coulee, and I was by myself, and that, hunting solo, that's one of your problems. And I eventually I couldn't remember, I'd never been down in there to know how deep these coulees were and how long he was going to stay, but I had a pretty good idea with the sun on it. I hadn't seen him in a while. I assumed he bedded. So I snuck down in there and I made a pretty good stalk, and I popped up right where I was hoping he'd be bedded in the only patch of shade in the whole basin right below me. And as I popped up with my bow, I caught movement out of my eye, and there he was about 80 yards down. He had fed up this coulee and then turned and gone back downhill and rebedded. And so I got to see that beautiful rack staring at me at 80 yards, and then he got up and bounced away into the timber. And that was a heart wrencher for sure, because then I spent the next week just going, what if he left? What if he's gone timber? What if he's going into a different area? Because I guess that's my only negative with putting so much work into one specific deer is you just overthink yourself way too much.
Right? Well, you have to. Yeah, you're always second guessing, or I should have done this, and it's always hindsight later. You think, gosh, yeah. I shouldn't have stalked that buck. I had a week left, and then I had rifle season, but he was in a good spot in a good location, and you made a try at him, and it didn't pencil out. And the nice thing is that it, and who knows, that could have played a role in your success as well. It could have pushed him back to the country he was familiar in, pushed him back and tightened up his program. That's what I thought was interesting too, is how tight his program was during that bow season that you were talking. You only see him for minutes, and then you wouldn't see him at different times. But boy, that is a big buck program, and also where he's living at, like, to like what we were talking about earlier, he's living in a spot that's really tough to glass and tough to see him in. He's living on that high ridge, it's part of the reason he was able to grow so old and grow so big. But how killer, man. So made a play for him, didn't get him, and then the other cool thing is to be able to work with that other hunter and communicate back and forth and kind of work together so you're not screwing each other up. But I think that's so great on public land is there is a lot of hunters that are out there that are trying to accomplish the same goals, and you do run into guys and for the most part, like, everybody's pretty good, man. We don't want our own hunt screwed up, therefore we don't want to screw up anybody else's hunt. We want to have mutual respect for each other, and we had that this year where the Hawaii guys were going up for a real nice herd bull that they Janus ended up missing it that night, but they were going up and they had a couple guys that had came behind him in there, and they talked to him. They all figured out a game plan. Those guys played low and in the basin where the elk ended up going, and then these guys went up for him. But it's so nice when you can work it out where you're not screwing everybody up on the hillside like that. But how cool. And then so you went back up rifle season to try to catch up to that buck.
Yeah, so after that, I packed out knowing I wasn't going to see. I waited till Sunday morning, which was the next day after that stalk, and I knew he wasn't going to be out in the basin. It just the whole 5 weeks or so of hunting him archery and then also scouting him before the season opened just proved to me how lucky I was the morning I found him, because I never saw him in that low spot in the basin again until he shed his velvet, where he was out in the open. I mean, I just got lucky that I didn't, he wasn't in his normal high ridge spot. I probably would have walked out of there and never seen him. It's just one of those things with big bucks that always makes you wonder how many you walked past or left up in a basin that you never saw. But so I hiked out and then kind of just planned my game plan. I knew I took time off work so I could hike in there 2 days before rifle opener. So I would have one full day of scouting before the rifle opener. And, I hiked in, left my camp in, I hiked in, and the morning of the 14th, the day before opener, I looked down in the basin and there he was feeding kind of right where I hoped to see him. And, so then all my anxiety started really going through the roof, wondering how this was all going to work out for me. So he disappeared pretty quick that morning into the low timber, which I expected him to do. And there's nowhere, it's thick, big patches of timber, so I knew I couldn't keep tabs on them. So I just kind of took it easy. I had all the water I needed packed up to my camp and everything. And then that evening I hiked up on the ridge and started glassing down in there trying to see where he was going to come out of, or did he come out and feed during the afternoon and I missed him. And I eventually caught movement in a little patch of scrub pines down in the avalanche chute below me, and it was him and his little group of bucks. And so I was pretty happy to see him there and had a pretty good idea he'd feed in that basin all night. And so I decided to leave before the winds shifted or anything, kind of, 30 minutes before dark. And I headed off down to my camp. As I was walking down to my camp, I saw something that was just not something, it was out of place. Pull up my bino and there's the white rump of a horse 50 yards from my tent.
Oh, no.
And, so a group of guys packed in with horses, and they were camped probably within 100 yards of my tent. And there's not much space up there on the ridge. And I couldn't believe I didn't run into the guys. I think as I came down the top of the ridge, they were doing a circle below me to look into that basin, because we never saw each other. And so that was once I knew they were camped right next to me, my adrenaline was in overdrive in terms of there's no way I'm going to lose this buck, and I got to do everything I can to be the first chance. So that night, I obviously didn't really sleep a wink all night, but I got out of my tent at like 4:30 in the morning, about an hour before I really was needed to, and I just decided I was going to hike. I made the decision basically that from where that buck was, I knew there was a small little ridge from my time that I'd spent. I mean, my scouting was 100% essential to me knowing that country and how to access into it. There's a small ridge that goes out and it's kind of, you can sneak out in the top part of the basin. You can almost stay hidden from if you get below it. And it's actually a pretty good access into the middle of the basin to make everything where I thought that buck was going to be about 300 yards. So I decided I need to get down there, but I obviously wasn't going to use any headlamp to go down the ridge. So I just left my tent really early and went incredibly slow and just went step by step in the dark and descended down into the basin through the timber and got below that ridge, that little kind of secondary ridge that pops out into there. And so that was my plan. I knew I just had to risk the fact he might get bumped or he might spook out if he had fed a different direction, but I had to risk something. I mean, I just had to be aggressive because in the past I've hunted deer where I haven't made the aggressive move and it ended up in me not getting an opportunity. So I decided to do the opposite. And I got on that ridge right at daylight. And as day was breaking, the minutes ticked by like hours, and I just searching for a deer body. And, 20 minutes went by before I finally found him. And it felt like a long time. And the whole time in my head, I'm telling myself, somebody else has to be looking at him by now. Someone else is putting their scope on him, and just one thing after the other in my own head. And when I finally found him, he was 300 yards away, and I got my scope on him, and I kind of might have rushed my first shot just a hair. And I pulled my first shot. I know I didn't hit him. And he ran about 30, 40 yards, just kind of side hilling because he didn't know what had happened. And then he stopped again, and I composed myself and made the correct shot that I should have made the first time. But I've never considered myself the best shooter in the world. I was a better guide being able to tell people to keep shooting.
Well, it isn't easy. Like, a lot of people think it's a given with a rifle, but it's the same deal with a bow or any shot. And 300, like you say, oh yeah, 300 shot, and we're in the day and age of long range shooting, but 300 yard shot, that's a good shot, man. You got to keep on your target. You got to squeeze on the trigger, and the most important thing with shooting a rifle is a good rest. And you know how to shoot a rifle as good as anybody, but it's just not a given. And I bet guiding, you've seen some guys miss some pretty easy shots over the years with their rifle, because I know I have, just between my buddies and my family and myself. I can't throw myself out of the mix as well, but I've seen some easy rifle shots that buck fever is real. It's a little shake in that scope. And I think the biggest mistake guys make with a rifle is a rest is so key, like spending your time to make sure you have the right rest and the right setup. But then I think like finding that animal in the crosshairs and jerking the trigger, I think, is the worst thing you can do. It's trying to keep those crosshairs on that body where you want to hit as you're squeezing it. It's easy said here in a podcast, but when you're sitting with a next level buck in front of you, man, I can see how it can happen so easy. But shooting a rifle is no gimme either. You got to be on your game there too, and spend time with your rifle is a big part of it too, which I'm sure you did this summer. Just shooting it a bunch and being familiar with it, familiar with getting in those shooting positions. Like, there's a lot to it.
Yeah, and I mean, there's definitely people that put way more effort into it than I'm just long range hunting to me is just not, 300 to me is a long shot, and there's guys out there that can make those 700-800 yard shots all day. But in my mind, I personally just don't see the hunting when you can sit there and talk to your friend at this voice tone and the animal is in no way, shape, or form going to spook. That kind of loses the hunting part of it. I mean, it's a great shot, but it's not necessarily hunting anymore if you are shooting at 1,000 yards. But
yeah, I mean, it's one of those things,
that's
like
my personal opinion of, obviously, that's a heated issue in anything regarding hunting. I mean, the reason is we're all out here doing the same thing, enjoying the outdoors. I just don't personally have any desire to be shooting an elk or a deer at 1,000 yards. I'd rather be shooting them at 300 or 200 or preferably at 40.
Yeah, well, and a lot of that's like personal preference, like you say, too, and to each their own. Everybody gets something different out of hunting, and a lot of guys, it is that marksmanship, and it is spending a ton of time with their rifle and their loads and making sure everything's dialed in, and then, executing a perfect shot under, a extreme amount of pressure and in long range. And so for some guys, that's it. I mean, I'm with you. I like to get close. Like, I'm a bow and arrow guy. I like to get extremely close, but with the rifle, I'm that same way. But you do have a little bit more range, and so I'm with you. Like, when I'm hunting with my dad or my family a lot, like, we'll set up for those 300-yard shots because I know he can make that shot, and I know that's in his range or in his wheelhouse, and so will also get into that 200-300, and I don't like to push it too close for him because I don't want to risk like our wind dropping down into that buck or risk spooking that buck because I know he can make that shot. And so yeah, there's just different ways to go about it, and guys get different things out of it. And I'm not opposed if guys like to shoot long range and do that. Like it's its own challenge, you know, or its own deal. But I'm with you, man. I like to get close and same thing with the bow. I like to get close and kill them, you know.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, for me, it was great to then. I mean, obviously, to see that buck go down was just a wave of emotions, and the anxiety was off my back, and I think like you and I talked the last time, I've never been the type to yell and hoot and holler or anything. The silence of the mountains is just as much of a, kind of victory to me. So I kind of just sat there, and I might have raised my hands above my head once or twice in silence, but I just took it all in, and, it kind of all settled that a dream of, getting a big high country buck had finally settled in, and the work had paid off. And once I started walking over to him and took my time with pictures and got ready for what would be a hellacious pack out for the rest of the day, but well worth it, all I could really think about was archery elk hunting.
That's a sign you're a true hunter, right?
Yeah, I was ready. I'd been spending most of my weekdays during archery season. Obviously, I couldn't get up in the high country to go after that buck right after work, so I'd been hunting around here for hunting bulls, and just it was, from every single person I talked to all over the place. So slow rut, I had some good action, just passed on some younger bulls, and I knew what I was. Same deal with, kind of my deer. I knew what was possible with the general tag where I hunt and the different places I can go, and I wasn't picky. I wasn't going to be choosing to shoot the first animal I saw, and I wanted to have a long season, but I was definitely ready to start chasing elk, and I kept feeling like I was missing out on bugling action, being so focused on deer. So it was just as much a weight off my shoulders to be able to start hunting elk as it was, to have the deer tag punched and meat in the freezer.
Yeah, absolutely. Man, it's stressful when you find a big deer, isn't it? Like a big deer on public ground. Like you say, you're almost your worst enemy, just over-guessing, or overthinking everything.
It's entirely a mental game with myself of I just need to quit second guessing and 10th guessing everything I do and just hunt. And there's some things that are just completely out of your control in terms of other hunters, and that was I just knew I needed to do exactly what I wanted to do, put as much effort as I could, how I wanted to do it, and if it worked out, it was going to work out, and if it didn't, I wasn't going to walk out of there thinking I could have tried harder, because I knew I was putting it all out there, and this year it worked out. Not every year it's going to do that.
Yeah, no, it did all work out. Yeah, I love to see when effort equals success, and like you say, taking those extra steps of waking up at 4:30 and sneaking down in the drainage to be in a shooting position instead of a glassing position come first light, because you knew you had other pressure in there, and you knew other guys were gunning for that buck. But yeah, you made the right moves, man. That's just awesome to see, and what a buck. So he's got a killer typical frame, and then he's got just a pile of extras on him, huh?
Yeah, he's got some pretty good extras, just kickers off his right side. And he's kind of got some gnarlness around his base, nothing big really, but he's just a big old heavy buck. He's a little short on his G2s and on his main beams, which I'm not gonna if I have to pick him apart. Yeah, when I ran the tape, he basically grossed out right at 200, which that's the goal. And I don't need to tape him after 60 days. It's not like he's a book buck. He hit that mark once, and that's all that matters for me.
Yeah, that's what I do. I score him once when I kill him, and that's about it. Like I've had a few scored for Pope and Young, so I guess that isn't entirely true. But for the most part, I score him when I kill him, and I score it to the exact inch. I want to know exactly what they are.
Yeah.
It's weird when guys are scoring. Like a lot of guys, I think, just guess at the number they want their buck to be, and that's what the number it is. They'll just tell you, I shot 180 or 190 inch deer, and But and then some guys, I think on the tape, I think they add quite a few inches just by the mark of the tape. So where the main beam comes through, you draw a line
Right.
there, and then that's where you take the measurement. Well, if you give yourself a half inch on every one of those measurements, pretty soon you gain 10 inches on that buck, you know. And so I do want to know exactly what my bull or buck scores, and just for knowledge, you know, more so than telling guys, it's just to know what I'm looking at and to know what I judged them and how close I was, and so I can tell in the future when I'm judging up bucks, and you know, love it or hate it, it is the reference point for deer. Like, we don't get to weigh their horns, or, you know, like they used to judge them by how wide, but, you know, score is the tell of a deer, and you know, it isn't the best judge all deer. Like, you can kill a 180 incher that's an absolute giant, or you can kill a 180 incher that's, you know, a little bit more spindly horn. And so it's not a true gauge, but it's the best gauge that we have as mule deer hunters, or as hunters.
Right.
And so, man, I'm with you. I throw that tape on, and I don't want to tape him in 60 days after he shrunk 5 or 6 inches. Like, I want to tape him the day I shot him, you know, and know exactly what he was on the hoof, and then, you know, that's his gross score for the rest of the time that I'm in possession of that buck, or, you know, when he hangs on my wall or whatever. But that's the way I like to do it too.
Oh, exactly. And I mean, yeah, just as much for me, it's more for
Yeah, you must be popular. Hopefully it's not work calling you for a power outage or something, huh?
No, I'd ignore that one probably right now, but it's actually an elk hunting friend who I don't know what he wants, but
it's probably important then.
So that's on my phone. Unfortunately, my electronic knowledge isn't up to par right now.
No worries at all. No big deal.
No, it's just, for me, I think all those years of guiding and everything, and just growing up out here in the West, just that iconic image and that iconic, like, true trophy is that 200-inch high country deer. That's just always been a dream of mine for me. And so, you know, to hit that mark is an awesome feeling. But if that deer would have eventually, you know, grossed out at 195 or anything like that, that wouldn't have tarnished his, you know, my happiness with him at all, because he had, you know, like what I kind of just like to, you know, refer to as just that wow factor. The moment I saw him, those kickers, the mass that he had, especially when he was in velvet, I mean, he had everything that I had been sleeping of and seeing, you know, in my dreams, the type of deer I wanted to hunt this year. He had mass. He was an older deer. He had width. He had unique character to him. And it was just, he was everything I wanted. And the score didn't matter. I mean, it's awesome that he hit that mark, but I could have cared less, you know, if he would have been left or right of that mark a couple inches either way, because, you know, the inches aren't what matters. It's just the, you know, the pursuit and the story. And I'm going to have a hell of a story that sticks with me forever about, you know, him being my first true giant high country buck and everything that went into getting him.
Yeah, well said and well put, and hard earned too. That definitely helps the experience, or when you look back on it, you know, you just have such positive feelings, and you know, you went 10 out of 11 weekends scouting, found that thing on your 7th weekend, and then kept with them, and that's that's how I like to scout as well, is covering country. And we talked about it on the first podcast, is that humans are made to explore, and us hunters, gosh, I just love to explore new country. And you were talking earlier in the beginning of this conversation about connecting the dots. And I think that's really important. And what you mean by that, or what I think you mean by that, is, you know, you have these giant mountain ranges that stretch for 100 miles, and you go up one drainage and you hunt for as far as you can walk, but then you really don't know what's south or what's north or what's over the top or over the side. Maybe you get a peek at it, but as you start to hunt more of those spots, like, you start to get a feel for the entire mountain range, and how, you know, that spot connects to the next spot, connects to the next spot over the ridge, and why they like what they do. And you're just putting more pieces to the puzzle together. But, man, that just makes that experience so much more fulfilling. And, man, I couldn't be happier for you. I knew you were working hard, and you turned up some good bucks, and just psyched to hear that you put that buck down. And so then, like you said, you hardly had that buck packed out, and you were thinking about elk. And so that's part of the deal with us Western hunters, is it all comes at once in the fall. In each portion of it, hunting mule deer is so fun, and also hunting elk is so fun, and so you don't want to miss out on that experience. And so, you know, instantly, like, a little relief off you, and go, oh, now it's to hunt an elk. And you're able to turn up a good bull this year too.
Yeah, I mean, it was, that feeling was so great just to know, oh, good, now I can go hike in the hills, blow on a tube, and they might talk back to me. I don't have to sit there through my binos all the time. It was a nice, definitely a release, and so I'd gotten into some decent bulls around locally here, but for me, the years of guiding and all that, I just love hunting elk off horses and being packed into the wilderness and getting far away. So as soon as I got that buck out, I made plans to pick up a couple horses for the rest of the fall. And the area I wanted to go into is a place I've wanted to hunt now for 2 years. It's really remote, big country, but I know it holds some really big bulls. It also holds a decent population of grizzlies, but I wasn't too worried about that. But I always wanted to go up into this area. And then, of course, as I'm sure you might have seen in the sky when you were hunting with your dad, some, reckless hunters decided to leave a warming fire on the side of a hill and burn down what would eventually be 60,000 acres of country and 55 homes in the Roosevelt fire.
Oh, man.
But so when that got going, I was sitting there with plans to pack into this one area, which was it was on towards the east side of that fire, and the fire wasn't there yet, and it really wasn't affecting the spot where I was going to hunt. But the way they shut down roads, I couldn't access where I needed to access to get into it. And I didn't want to risk being up in there and having someone come tell me, oh, hey, the wind shifted, you got to leave. So I decided it's funny how my life really just revolves around deer hunting. But going back to last season when I was in just full pursuit mode of trying to find deer, I went and hunted a kind of a big canyon area, and I hiked way up. I never did see a deer that day, but I looked high up on this really nasty remote ridge, and there was a huge 6x7 bull pushing cows at the end of September, and he was out in broad daylight, and it looked like he hadn't even been pushed or hunter pressured at all. And I always told myself in the back of the head, I'm like, I can't hunt that bull without horses, but I'm going to hunt him. I'm going to hunt this area someday. That looks like good country. So I decided to go try and figure a way up into that basin country. And between that time I hiked in there and between Google Earth, I had a pretty good idea how I could access it, but I knew it was going to be a pretty nasty way to get in there. But I ended up getting horses, hiking in the next weekend, which was still archery season. And a friend of mine who still had a rifle deer tag came with me. And and he also had an archery elk tag, but I told him, I said, you're deer hunting. I have the horses. I'm not packing 2 elk out of here on 2 horses. And we went up in there and we camped the night in the main drainage. And I looked up in the exact same hillside I saw a big bull on the year before. And there was a nice, beautiful 6-point with a big, long main beams and big royals. And I was like, well, this is awesome. This is great. And so we got up in there, and over the next 2 days, I mean, I got into some of the most elk rut action I've had in my life. It was incredible. And it was too late into the rut that the big bulls were so herded up, and there was so many bulls in there cow stealing. I just couldn't break the ranks of any. There was 3 major herds, one at the mouth of the drainage, which was the bull we seen at the night before. There was another big herd living in the timber in the middle of the drainage that I never did see on that hunt. And then there was another herd at the head of the drainage. And we knew all the big bulls that we saw were in the 330 and above class and were, 100% shooters, but we had a ton of fun. My friend missed a few deer and a few nice deer. And I passed up on numerous bulls, some really young, some nice younger 6-points and some big 5s. And I couldn't close that distance in the herd without risking blowing them out, knowing that the next week rifle was going to open and I could be back in here with my rifle. I wasn't going to risk blowing them out to trying to get on these bulls that just weren't cooperating. So we packed out of there, and I made plans to come back in and with my rifle the next weekend, and I ended up coming in solo. And the funny thing was, where we camped up in the basin, we had elk waking us up all night long, bugling all around us. They were coming into the meadow. I mean, you could tell these elk were not pressured hunting wise. It wasn't, I just couldn't believe it. It's one of those things you kind of hope to find. And that's one of the reasons I really like to use horses, is that's one of the things kind of you're able to do with elk, is when you break that 8-10 mile barrier, you can find some of those elk that just don't get that pressure. And I went in there and I set up camp in the dark. I rode in 3 hours in the dark after work because it was already late. And for me, riding horses in the dark is kind of peaceful. It's something I'm so used to. I enjoyed it. And as I was riding up in the basin, I heard bugling, and so I knew nobody else had been in there the couple days previous when rifle opened. And I spent all night basically listening to bulls bugle all around my camp. And I got up the next morning and hiked up out of camp, and the bull that I'd never seen the week before was the one that was kind of running the herd that was living in the timber. He just had this unique, deep, nasty growl to him, and he was just a unique bugle. And I knew it was him that was up above my camp. And I just, there was something in your head when you hear those deep, nasty growls. You just know you want to see that bull. Sometimes the bugle doesn't end up being what you're hoping it is, but I just knew I had to see that bull. And it turned out to be just this gorgeous 6-point. And I knew right when I seen him at first light, he was a shooter. I didn't really analyze him nearly as much as I would, later when I walked up on him, but I was able to sneak in, and as I was waiting for him, he was kind of feeding up on top of a set of cliffs above me. And I was about 250 yards, and he disappeared. I could only see the top of his horns. And I knew he was feeding towards where he was probably going to come out in an opening the way his cows were feeding. And as I'm sitting there, a raghorn satellite 6 comes about 15 yards from me and just starts staring at me right in front of me. And I was so worried he was going to blow my cover and everything, but the wind was perfect, and he kind of scooted to the side and stood there at 20 yards just staring at me. And that bull finally stepped out and presented me a shot. And this time, unlike the deer, I knew I was alone, and I took my time and, one shot, and I watched him disappear below that same kind of ridge line that he was right on top of, and I knew he went down. And when about 30, 45 minutes later, as I started walking up on him, that's when I realized the type of bull I had shot. I knew he was a good, solid 6, and for me, a general tag, no doubt, no question shooter bull. But as I started walking up on him, he just kept growing, and he continued to until I put my hands on him, and I was overwhelmed. I really did not expect to go up into that area and pull out a 360 class bull. I was just, floored. And then over the next 13 hours that it took me to break him down and pack him out, I had plenty of time to think about it, but I kept smiling the whole time.
Oh, good for you. Man, that's elk hunting, isn't it? Like, I love getting into him like that. Man, what a beautiful big 6-point too. Gosh, just dark horns, and even though you can get tricked by their bugle, you can just tell when it's this old, raspy, just growly bugle. Like you say, you want to get eyes on that bull, and you never quite know, you can't put a score to him. You just know it's a big, mature bull that you want to see, and you most likely or dang near, I'd put money on it every time it's a bull I want to shoot, unless he's all busted up or something. It's like, I can hear his bugle and I can tell what that bull is, and you can always get fooled or tricked. Sometimes early in the season they're not as raspy or growly, but really us guys that spend a lot of time in the elk woods, you pretty much know the type of bull that's bugling at you.
Yeah, and I mean, I've always said it through the years I used to teach at a guide and pack school up in Montana, and we used to tell, guys that were there who really weren't experienced elk hunters trying to get jobs as backcountry guides, you can't judge a bull based on the bugle, but when it comes to those big mature bulls, I mean, you can't obviously judge them, that's going to be a 350 bull, but it's going to be a mature bull that's older in age by those raspy bugles. And those, for me, those are the type of bulls I like to pursue and chase. But to hunt a giant basin area that just had 3 big herds just load, I mean, I probably saw between 25 and 30 bulls on that archery weekend, the weekend before. And, to know the bulls that I left up there, one in particular who's probably just right at about the same size as my bull, just a little bit different horn construction, not as long of beams, but really good fifths and everything. I mean, it already has me just kind of more than daydreaming nonstop about trying to get up in there a little bit earlier in archery season next year to hit them before they really get too cowed up to where I hit them just a little bit too late to pull those big herd bulls away from the cows. There was so much cow stealing. It was incredible. I was so intermixed right among them, when I was on the archery hunt, I had elk all over me. I wanted to pull out my camera and just record it because I wasn't doing any calling, and it was just, I mean, hours of bugling nonstop all around me. It was so much fun just to be there and be a part of it.
Oh, those are the moments that I live for. Like, I will hike, for all year long, multiple years in a row, as many days as I can go, miles and elevations to get into that experience. Like that
Yeah.
experience when you're in it and you have elk all around you and bugling like crazy and cow calling and all the noises, like the excitement and the thrill of that. That's tough to match with any kind of hunting out there. It just doesn't get more thrilling than that. I love those big elk parties like that. I love getting into them. I had a great one like the last day of the season this year where I was into a good elk party, with the snow and the cold and north wind, and man, it was just amazing. But yeah, those are the moments I live for, and us as hunters, like you just keep trying to recreate or search for that, that
Right.
magical drainage or that spot that's holding them like that spot that you're talking about. So yeah, that'll be a spot you'll have to go check out a little bit earlier. And so you want to go in there earlier. So you think when those big herd bulls are cowed up like that, like they're not chasing sounds or chasing bugles, they're just trying to keep the cows they have. And so you want to get in
Yeah.
there earlier before those big bulls are cowed up, where they're still searching or looking to pick up more cows or traveling with a smaller herd that's not such a big group. Do I have you right?
Yeah, and I've always, I guess it all depends on the scenario. Sometimes you can hunt a big bull when he's herded up with cows when it's just him and not that many other satellites, if you can, cut him off or things like that. But I did not, I mean, I 100% did not expect to see what I saw up there that archery weekend. I mean, I did not expect to see 25 to 30 bulls, which of those, I mean, 6 of them were in the 320 and above class, and some of those were satellite bulls. I was floored. I did this area I went into. I really did not expect to find bulls of that caliber. I mean, I knew there should be some herd bulls of that caliber based on what I'd seen the year before. I just didn't expect to see 25 to 30 bulls in one basin area, and just all these 3 different herds of elk in this pretty small area for 3 big herds of elk to be. And so my heart, when I got on them, I knew pretty right away, just watching the herd bulls that I got to watch, that they were aggressively rutting. They were chasing off all the other satellites, but they weren't coming to calls. I mean, they would bugle to a bugle all day long. They'd bugle to a cow call all day long, but they weren't going to leave the hot cow more than 10 yards away. And I just knew with the amount of elk in each herd, there was just no way I was going to break the rank without risking blowing the whole group of them out of there, and which is something I didn't want to do, with knowing that I had the opportunity to come in with a rifle. If I didn't have that opportunity, I would have had to focus on being a lot more aggressive.
Yeah, you played it smart for sure. Yeah, it seems like late in the season, those elk tend to group up. Like the feed burns off, they're looking for those second cycle estrus cows, that didn't get bred the first time around. That now they're, there's not as many cows going into estrus, but it's those ones coming into second cycle. But it seems like those elk, they tend to really group up towards the end of the season. And I've also seen it like at the beginning of the season, like around September 5th or so. Like I've noticed the cows will summer all summer long in these areas and in these basins, and then right about when the rut kicks off, all these bulls move in, and they all sort out which ones are going to get which cows, and then they take off with their herds and get out of that drainage. But that's another time where I've seen those big get-togethers or those big parties of elk. But man, I just love being into them like that. There is nothing like that.
No, it's awesome. And kind of going to what you're saying about the summer scouting elk, that one of the spots I had scouted for deer earlier in the season was some big high country stuff that I'd never been in. And I actually found like 300 head of elk way up at 11,000 feet, but there wasn't a single, there was like a couple raghorn, 4s or 5s. There wasn't a single, even small 6 in the whole group. And so the whole time I'm just sitting there, I'm like, I know there's going to be herd bulls coming to split up 300 cows at some point up here. So that was another area that was in the back of my head, but it was just so remote. Even with horses, I was having a hard time trying to figure out how I was going to get into it. So when I went back to thinking on last year, I was like, yeah, why am I even overthinking this? I need to go where I know there was a big herd bull last year. That's the type of place they're going to be this year. And I got lucky that it turned out to be just at least for this year, was an elk honey hole. And I mean, I know I can go back there next year and there's going to be some mature bulls there. And I'd really love to see one bull in particular make it to next year and really drop my jaw if I could see him another year older.
Yeah, well, good for you. You got some awesome prospects for next season. Had an insane season this year, man. Really happy to see. I love seeing when a guy really puts the effort in and then accomplishes his goals. And like you say, you got so much backcountry savvy too. Been guiding and hunting for so many years. So man, it's really cool to see.
Yeah, man, I appreciate it. It's some years it works out. Some years, like last year for me, it didn't. But I can't complain as long as my freezer's full, and I always have a late season cow tag that I can do that with. And for me, that's kind of why I guess put so much effort into, chasing a big buck and a big bull is in the end, I just want to know I have meat through the winter and in the summer, and I can always fill that with a late season cow tag. So that's kind of why I have the ability with, being lucky to be a Wyoming resident. The tags that I'm able to buy over the counter enabled me to be pretty picky in terms of what I know I can do and get away with. And, if I was living back in Idaho where I grew up and things like that, the seasons are structured differently where I wouldn't be as picky because I'm limited more into how I'm going to fill the freezer or, what kind of tags I could have.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's like why we all set different goals, and also those goals have to match your opportunities that you're able to create. If you never found a 360 bull, you couldn't hold out for a 360 bull. They just don't grow in your area. You don't see them, So yeah,
Right.
they have to match your opportunities, and it is good that you have a backup plan. And that's like me. Like they'll give me 5 whitetail doe tags over the counter. So if I hold out for a really nice 6-point bull one year and I don't kill one, like I know I'm going to have plenty of meat to make it through the freezer. I've got other mule deer hunts and I've got other ways to supplement my freezer. But yeah, that's cool. You got a special opportunity. You've created a good life for yourself there in Wyoming, and yeah, it's just neat to see. It's really cool when we have the opportunity to live out west here and really enjoy the country that surrounds us too, and the mountains that surround us. It's just really fun to get back there and test our skills and test ourselves both mentally and physically, because it is a grind. 10 out of 11 weekends this summer is a grind. You're going for it constantly, and you're also trying to work a full-time job and take care of other responsibilities. Like it isn't easy. So it's really good that you get out and make the most of it.
Yeah, you gotta try. I'm already sitting here calculating how many days off I'll have by next fall, but I've got a wedding I need to go to here, but a trip here. I mean, it's definitely, we all, the majority of people are just, we work, we're glorified weekend warriors who take a little extra time off when we can in hunting season. And, for me, I structure so much of my scouting and hunting around knowing I can do a lot of this on if I leave work on Friday afternoon in the summer, I can scout this area. I can hunt this area on a weekend trip, and you got to just kind of base it by what you're able to get away with and not push yourself too far. Because if you're scouting country that you really can't hunt with the time you're be given, you're just going to push yourself and drive yourself crazy. And so I try and take that into consideration, even though, about every August 15th, I consider I'd need to quit my job for the next 2 months, but I still haven't done that one yet.
Yeah, we are wired the exact same, and I think we're wired the same as a lot of Western hunters out there. It's just we're lucky we have passion in our life and something that we love so much that we try to plan our whole entire year around. So, man, it's so cool. I'm so glad I connected with you. So, Stephen, the sponsor for today's show is Yeti, and so they gave us a 30-ounce tumbler and a 36-ounce Rambler. The Rambler's like a thermos with a lid on it. Man, it's really killer. I've been using it. Great for coffee and cold drinks as well. But hang on, after the podcast, I'll grab your address from you. We'll send you that and also some Eastmans gear. But man, I sure appreciate you taking the time. Again, I'm just really happy I connected with you. You're just a diehard Western hunter, and congratulations on all your success this season.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. Congrats on yours as well. Always enjoy talking to you about hunting big game in the high country of the West.
Yeah, right on, man. Well, we'll keep in touch, and we'll have you on again, and get ready for next season.
All right, man. Sounds good. Same to you.
Okay. All right, guys, that's a wrap. Really fun conversation with Stephen, just back and forth, and just public land hunting for next level critters. I love that stuff. I swear I could talk all day long about hunting public ground, and I love that western Wyoming, and thinking about hunting Wyoming next year. I got a couple points there, something like that. 2015, I think, is the last year I hunted it. So I really want to get back there. I love hunting mule deer in that country, and hunting it with my dad this year was an amazing experience. It's just really fun to get in there. I had never seen it during the rifle season, and pressure wasn't too bad where I was at. But I think it depends on where you go, and and luck of the draw too. Sometimes the weather pushes all the people in one place, or sometimes it's non-residents. We can't hunt the wilderness, and so that forces a lot of us onto the national forest. And also, hunting that opening week is usually a lot of pressure. So there's ways to get around it so we can all enjoy the public lands, that these western states have to offer. But you just gotta be strategic and with your planning, and with the places you're hunting, and then be flexible, be willing to go to other places, be willing to hike farther, hike longer, being able to bushwhack off trail, get away from water, all those things that we talk about to get away from the pressure. But yeah, it'll be fun starting to plan out next season. I love starting to think about tags and hunts and opportunities. It's kind of like buying a lotto ticket when you apply for these tags. The lotto ticket, yeah, you're never going to win with the odds, but there's a chance, and so you just start thinking over the possibilities, and you got way better odds at drawing a decent tag than you do winning the lotto. But it's just the possibility of going on these adventure hunts that's really fun to play out in your mind, and kind of look at the different mountain ranges in different states and try to plan out your fall. So it's a really fun time of year. I love doing all the research, and you're trying to find those areas that hold those next level critters. So fun putting in the research and putting in the work, and you really feel like you're paying your dues towards next season. So that'll be fun. That's coming up. Couple more hunts left though. Say I've got to get this work done, and knuckle down, and get this house finished and things. But the days I do have, I'm going to go enjoy myself, and it's going to be a really fun trip with my daughter here. We only got a couple days, but just go have some fun and quality time, and good conversations, and just have an adventure together. So it's pretty fun. I'm pretty fortunate that she enjoys it and still wants to go, and so yeah, I get my truck loaded up here, and get on the road when she gets out of school. I got to go get a little work done here, but get this podcast out and everything I need to get done, and then I can feel pretty good about being out for the weekend. But yeah, sponsor for today's show is Yeti. Again, thanks to Yeti for giving me that Rambler and tumbler. I was able to pass on to Steven and give to him. Just amazing thermoses, cups. I love their coolers. Keeps ice longer. Bear-proof container. Just amazing products and amazing company, and can't thank them enough for sponsoring the podcast. And yeah, over there at Eastmans, like I say, I saw Lindsay, the video editing gal, shot a deer the other day, which, I don't think she was a hunter before she started at Eastmans, so that's pretty amazing to see. And yeah, I know, Guy and Ike both crushed good mule deer and antelope, and it's just been a heck of a season for Eastmans, and can't wait to see some of these hunts coming out on Beyond the Grid and on Eastmans Hunting TV. It's going to be amazing. I know I turned in a couple of hunts that I know it's the best work I've ever done. I can't wait for them to edit together. And fell a little short on the elk hunt. You guys probably heard in that solo episode, if you guys caught that, my malfunction with my bow. God, it just kills me. But I got that bow all set up and just shooting right now. Yeah, I'm fortunate. Working for Eastman's, and got one of those new Matthews coming. And I actually saw that we picked up Matthews as a sponsor for the podcast, which is just absolutely amazing. This content, my house by day or my job by day is building houses, and that's really what pays my bills and runs the household here and pays for my family and everything I'm able to do. But it sure is nice, taking the time to do this podcast. It eats up a lot of my free time. It's a labor of love. It's something I love to have these conversations, these next level conversations, but it's free content that I'm putting out there that nobody has to pay for to get. get that you can all listen to and improve your hunting skill, and that's all afforded by these sponsors. So make sure to check out these sponsors that we have on the show. We only have the best gear. I'm fortunate that working for Eastmans, they have good relationships with these companies, and yeah, it's nice to get a little bonus, or at least get paid for my time of putting out this content. It's amazing, really. So yeah, I'm pretty stoked. Can't wait to get this new Matthews in my hand. The last year's the Triax is just a shooter. I don't know how they can outdo that bow. I was really excited, or really pumped with the way that bow shoots. So I got that new rest on it that actually works in the cold. So I'm stoked about that. But yeah, it's killer. Life is good, just busy. Just get some work done and hunt as I can, and hopefully I get lucky on a nice heavy old rutted up buck. But we'll give her hell trying anyway. So well, that's a wrap, guys. I better get to work. I got to pour some concrete counters here, and so we're gonna pour one of those, and then try to get out of there at a decent hour, and get on the road, and get to some good muley country, and hopefully in the morning me and Taylor, my daughter, can turn up a good one, and I know she's dialed with that rifle and shooting positions, and got her ready for everything I need to get her ready for. So yeah, I just got to get out there and start hunting and see what we can turn up and have some fun together anyways. So thanks as always, guys, for the support, the downloads on the podcast, and yeah, without you guys I couldn't make this thing happen. And so I just want to look out for you, and make sure that I'm putting out really good content, and making it easy to get, and quality conversations, good guests. I'm always trying to improve every facet of my life, but this podcast, it's just I want to put the majority of my effort into it just to make it as good as I can make it. There's a lot of podcasts out there nowadays, and we got to find our niche, and we got to keep putting out really good content, or there's like I say, there's a lot of competition out there, and we just want to separate ourselves from the competition and make sure that we're giving you guys really good content to listen to. And God, it makes the day go better, doesn't it? Like, podcasts are just a huge part of my life. I love listening to them as they just pass the time, and it's nice that you're improving your life, or you're learning and gathering information as you're working, or as you're driving or commuting. It's just it's been hugely beneficial for me. I just love listening to them, and I know you guys do too. These podcasts are just amazing. Not I'm not saying like my podcast is bad. I'm just saying podcasts in general are amazing. But anyways, that's a wrap. God, I'm delusional. I got to get some work done here. I just been working too much, but have some fun tomorrow. But thanks as always, guys, for all the support. I wish you guys the best of hunting the rest of this season, and I've seen you guys had some success this year. And, I'm sure you've had some failures too, but you got a couple options. You either keep working hard towards your goals, or I don't know what the other option is, but that's definitely always the answer for me, is to stay positive, keep working hard towards my goals, and positive things just seem to happen, and I know it'll happen for you guys too. But thanks again, guys. I've been rambling too long. That's a wrap. Eastmans Elevated, Stephen Rosso, great conversation. Thanks again, guys.